There are now no more Splash Mountains left in the United States. There haven't been for a while, but it's kind of official now that the second of the two Tiana's Bayou Adventure rides, Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom, is about to open. It's been open for Magic Key previews for a couple weeks now. I went out about a week and a half ago to give it a couple rides and give you my thoughts on it. But the journey to here, of course, is in the 1980s. Disneyland decided they needed a log flume ride to compete with Knott's Berry Farm and their very famous Timber Mountain log flume ride. And eventually, famed Imagineer Tony Baxter came up with an idea that would reuse the soon-to-be abandoned animatronics from America Sings in Tomorrowland, a Mark Davis creation, with a Song of the South themed attraction in the log flume for a new area of the park that would be called Critter Country, because Bear Country wasn't working. As big a hit as the Country Bears were in Florida and California, no one was going back there to see them. So they thought, well, not only do we need a log flume, maybe if we had something to draw people back here, people would go see the Country Bears. That didn't happen. But nonetheless, Splash Mountain did and became an immediate hit, so much of a hit that it became an indelible part of the Disney parks around the world. Pretty much immediately, it was greenlit for Walt Disney World, and not long after for Tokyo Disneyland. It opened at both of those in 1992. Now, we've already reviewed the replacement of Splash Mountain in Florida with that Tiana's Bayou Adventure. I think that is required viewing, really, for diving into this one. That is going to be a longer review than this one is, because that one we are going to review the concept from start to finish. This one, we're focusing solely on the Disneyland version, what makes it different and what makes it better or worse than the previous version and or Splash Mountain. So I would go watch that first and foremost. But again, obviously in 2020, with some unrest out in the world, Disney decided it was about time to get rid of Song of the South in their parks, and with it announced that they would change both Splash Mountains to a Tiana ride themed to the Princess and the Frog film, which had been released way back in 2009. And there was a lot of backlash. Some people said, this is a terrible idea, or people said, why don't you give her a brand new ride that doesn't replace Splash Mountain? But we've talked about this at length already. Disney felt it was a necessity to do, and they did it, and here we are. So it's time to review and give an honest review of Disneyland's Tiana's Bayou Adventure. As you all know, I work without a script, so even in that intro, I'm thinking, what should I talk about in the intro? What should I say for when we dive in? Let's first talk about the idea of replacing Splash Mountain, because I think that lays a good groundwork for the Disneyland version. People will argue whether or not it needed to happen, but I don't know that it was arguable. The movie was a point of contention for a long time. Tony Baxter even said, when they did it the first time, they thought maybe it was an issue. So if that was a thought in the 1980s, in 2020, it was more than a thought. It was something most people in the world agreed with. Maybe not those of us in Disney fan circles, but the rest of the world. Personally, I don't love Song of the South. I love the Brer characters. They do not make up the entirety of that film, for those of you who have never seen it. It is live action and animation. They're not mixed, they're segmented. So the animated characters don't, they do mix, right? I mean, Uncle Remus sings Zippity-Doo-Dah, and that part, he's animated into that world. But for the most part, they're animated shorts framed by the Uncle Remus story. And the shorts, for the most part, I don't even know that I like the shorts. I just like the characters. I thought they were cute, which is a thing for me because they're Mark Davis characters. And Mark Davis characters, as I got older and understood that there were people that made these cartoons and made these theme park attractions, I came to realize that I really just like the art of Mark Davis a whole lot. And in some cases, the reason I'm a Disney fan is more Mark Davis than it is even Walt Disney, as for the reason. But Mark, those are Mark's characters, but Mark also, went on to, you probably know this, but for those who are maybe a little younger or a little newer to the fandom, I'll lay out some backstory. Mark Davis started his career in Disney animation, of course, animated Tinkerbell and a lot of other very famous female characters, the Bambi characters, and some characters in Song of the South. And the Song of the South characters mostly hung around, not necessarily because of the quality of the movie, but more so because Zippity Doo-Dah became an indelible part of the Disney company. It was the theme song, secondary only to When You Wish Upon a Star. And sometimes I feel like we often heard Zippity Doo-Dah more often, whether it was in the theme parks or on a VHS sing-along or whatever. Zippity Doo-Dah maybe showed up even more than When You Wish Upon a Star. So for me, in all of this, that is still the greatest loss, is that that song is no longer a part of Disney. Because for those of us who have been a part of the fandom since before 2020, or just the general public that's been, seen Disney content throughout their whole lives, it was ubiquitous. There was no Disney content, almost no Disney content without that song. I can barely think of many a parade that did not feature Zippity Doo-Dah. Plenty of those never featuring When You Wish Upon a Star. So the argument could be made. That's the biggest loss. Now, is Splash Mountain a loss? It is. It was a great attraction. I preferred, the Walt Disney World one was my favorite Disney World attraction for a very long time. And then I remember first time I went to Disneyland, I wrote it, and I just got off of it and I go, I hate this. I hate this Splash Mountain. One of the reasons we're going to talk about it at length, because I think it's the weakest link in the new attraction. But my biggest problem was the animatronics. Now, not the America Sings figures, because the first time I went, I understood that those were, for those that don't know the story, America Sings was a carousel theater attraction that replaced Carousel of Progress at Disneyland. Also designed by Mark Davis. So those are all Mark Davis designed characters. So when they were trying to come up with the idea for this log flume, of course, Song of the South made sense because the Br'ers were Mark Davis characters. And so guess what look like they belong together? Mark Davis's Song of the South characters and Mark Davis's America Sings characters. And it turned out if you put them in a room together, they kind of look like they might belong. And that's what happened. And obviously, so that was my favorite part about that attraction, was being a nerd. I got to see the America Sings animatronics, and that was cool. What I didn't understand was why there was such a staunch difference between the animatronics of the Br'ers at Disney World and the animatronics of them at Disneyland. I don't know what the budget was for the Disneyland Splash Mountain, but it's clear they spent most of it clearing the land and building the ride system and the mountain itself, because obviously the America Sings figures were just moved over, but they built the Brer characters from scratch. So Brer Rabbit, Brer Bear, and Brer Fox were built from scratch for the ride. They do not look like the ones in the Disney World one, and as I would learn later in life, not like the ones in the Tokyo attraction either. They were their own thing, and it's arguable that any of them really looked like their cartoon counterparts. Brer Rabbit looked like the Nesquik bunny. He didn't look like Brer Rabbit at all. And so that and the other thing we'll talk about later, really, you're lucky if before they announced the closure, I probably went on that splash 3 or 4 times in my life. I think in the last year it was open, I rode it like 10 or 15 times, but otherwise, it was not something I was clamoring to ride for a number of reasons. It wasn't worth getting that wet and ruining the day to see what was definitely an inferior version of the ride. But it was the first, and it was a smash hit. There's no doubt. So yeah, for those that don't know, the further story goes that in 1992, Disney World and Tokyo Disneyland open, and even weirder, the Tokyo Disneyland Brer Rabbit does not match the Disney World Brer Rabbit, even though they opened in the same year. I don't know why. They have different fur color. The head is kind of different. I don't completely understand why. I'm sure there's a story there because they were built at the same time and share a ton of similarities. But the Brer Fox and Brer Bear in the rides in the Disney World and Tokyo ones are identical. They're absolutely identical. But Brer Rabbit, someone in the Oriental Land Company had some sort of problem with the way the Brer Rabbit in the Florida ride was coming along, and decided that's not what they wanted. I don't know if they just thought they wanted it cuter, if they didn't like the color of the fur, or what happened, but something happened. Either way, progressed through my life, finally rode the one in Tokyo, and very clearly the Tokyo one, the best version, period. There was no competition. Disney World, a distant second, and Disneyland, I would say, even beyond that, a distant third as far as the quality of the ride. So when this was announced, it was, when you think about it, they announced a ride about New Orleans. At Disneyland, Critter Country is on the edge. It's on the border of New Orleans Square, right? New Orleans Square and the Haunted Mansion then become Critter Country. And so to extend the theme of the Louisiana Bayou beyond the French Quarter makes sense because that's how it works in the real world. It's what I liked about Magic Kingdom's first expansion plan that they pitched to the public, which was, oh, what's beyond Big Thunder? Well, it's Coco. I mean, Mexico is just south of Texas, and if Big Thunder Mountain is supposed to represent the South, if not that area, then yeah, you cross the border into Mexico. That makes sense. And so this would have been a similar idea, and that really works. It works great. Disney World, obviously there were problems. Now, there were problems with Disney World before that people don't like to talk about. And the problem was that Big Thunder Mountain already didn't really work next to Splash Mountain. They didn't align in any way. Now, if you go to a theme park and you can look past such things, if you aren't one of us, and I mean, I looked past it too, but obviously Splash Mountain was very pretty from the queue of Big Thunder, and the two of them across the river, it was thematically incoherent, but it was pretty and it worked. But it was incoherent in that those two types of mountains would not exist near each other at all. One of them is meant to represent like the national parks, like Bryce Canyon and the far west. And Splash Mountain represents absolutely the east. It is meant to be Georgia. That is meant to be Georgia. There is no argument that that was themed to Georgia. And so you had Georgia and maybe Texas or Arizona or something in the area, something geographically nearby represented in Big Thunder, and something on the East Coast, almost East Coast in Georgia, represented across from each other. They don't make sense together. And so everyone immediately, though, was mad because they announced the New Orleans ride, and it's like, well, how does New Orleans make sense next to, Bryce Canyon? Well, it makes about as much sense as Atlanta next to Bryce Canyon, so I don't know that I prescribe to that argument. And did Splash Mountain align with Pecos Bills? No, not really. That didn't work either. The town is not meant to be, it's a Western town. No matter what, the Georgian mountain is not gonna work with any of that. They went for it because it was built at Disneyland, it was a success, and Disney World wanted it, and it had a big plot that was meant for the Western River Expedition. It was a plot meant for another Western ride. And guess what we put there? A ride that takes place in Georgia. So it didn't work already. Does that necessarily mean you should go for the New Orleans ride? No, probably not, but they did. But so the argument at Disney World, to an extent, made sense. At Disneyland, there was no argument because undoubtedly, again, the bayou adjacent to the French Quarter makes sense. Works really well, in fact. And so it was originally Bear Country. It became Critter Country when Splash opened. And now, because it was going to connect story-wise to New Orleans Square, it's now Bayou Country. So we're now in the bayou. The only thing that doesn't make sense there would be Winnie the Pooh, which already didn't make sense there because they're not even real critters, they're stuffed animals from the United Kingdom. So they really already didn't make sense in Critter Country, where the theme was not, hey, it's animals from anywhere. That wasn't the theme, it already had a woodsy theme. And yeah, the 100-acre woods is in the woods, but also like they're two, the country bears and Winnie the Pooh are from two very different places in the world. And there are woods in other places in the world, in case you all didn't know. So that thematic inconsistency continues. I certainly hope they will rectify that. I'm still hoping and praying that they want to put the country bears back in Disneyland, and that would make sense with the new show. And it's got a southern feel to it, and it would work really well there. Why not? Could be the Bears could be playing in Louisiana. Why not? They could be on tour there. But nonetheless, it made more sense there. And so you could kind of tell from the moment the project was announced that, yeah, it was all going to make more sense at Disneyland. and it kind of seemed geared towards Disneyland. So in the case of Disney World, I will spoil the review if you didn't listen to me and go complete your required viewing of the honest review for Disney World. We liked it. We liked it very much. I think it's a very good attraction. I think it's at least even in quality with what it replaced. It has modern animatronics, good storytelling. The thing people have harped on continually since we did the review is the dead space. There's a lot of dead space in the ride. Now, compared to Splash Mountain, there is less happening. There is absolutely less happening. That being said, they didn't just leave sections of Splash Mountain there and just not theme them. There certainly is, there's all sorts of storytelling. There's parts where there's projections on the wall of fireflies going by. There's fireflies in the ceiling, if you will, in the tree canopy. There's story being told throughout these portions. You have music playing. They're not actual dead zones. And if that's going to be your argument, then is the beginning of Pirates of the Caribbean at any park a dead zone then? Should we be knocking that design? Because especially Pirates at Disneyland, you begin with the Bayou scene. And it's just very atmospheric. There's no story being told. There's not a whole bunch, there's one animatronic. Like there's not a whole lot going on except like in the distance, there's one animatronic that's just kind of there. He doesn't really do much. And there's a bunch of fireflies. And we don't knock that scene. You know why? Because it's a good start to the ride. It's atmospheric. It sets the scene. It puts you in a mood. Yeah, you're passing a restaurant also, but that's not a scene either. That's not something they built, with animatronics and it tells story. It just sets a scene. There are moments in Tiana's Bayou Adventure in Florida where it's setting a scene, right? When we make that first turn in, you get a couple seconds to take in the fact that it's now nighttime and you're in the bayou and beginning your journey. You have a few moments there to digest that. And even later, you get a few moments after those first few scenes with animatronics or animated figures to digest that the fireflies are coming along. And that is part of the story. They come in at the end. They've been following along the whole time. And what the ride does in its early stages is set up all these smaller animal characters that eventually we encounter in a much larger form when Mama Odie shrinks us down. I don't agree with people that the storytelling is bad in the Florida version. I do agree that wholeheartedly, undoubtedly, this was designed kind of first for Disneyland and then they figured out how to fit it into the Florida attraction. There is no doubt. Based on the way the Disneyland version turned out, there's no doubt. There is only one part of the Florida ride I have a big problem with, and that is before the drop. As you're ending your time in the jazz club, you have the fireflies in larger form projection based on the left side. But then there's kind of this dead space with just a bunch of big leaves. And then the Mama Odie, it's not really staged that much better in California. I still don't know what happened because I think they did a great job otherwise. The Mama Odie and Juju projection thing before the drop is just hard to see. It's just, there's this big lip. If you remember, the vultures were on a branch, and then there was a gap, and then there was rock work behind them. So instead of like clearing the branch and just making a big flat surface, for some reason they filled it in. And so it's not a branch, it's like a ledge, and then a projection up here behind. I'm doing this in front of me, not that it's going to make sense to you. Hopefully Billy is showing this. But there's a projection here and a ledge here. They filled in the branch to the rock as a ledge. And here's the screen. And as you come underneath, I'll illustrate with a toy as a grown man. As you come underneath the ledge, this inhibits your view of this screen. You can't see this. And so that's always been my problem, is it's hard to see her talking in that part of the ride. And beyond that, with that hard to see, it draws to attention the fact that there's just these big leaves on the left and right side in sort of what is the one part I feel is definitely dead space. So this is the only part of the ride I agree with people on it. I think eventually I hope Walt Disney World will decide to throw something there that's animated in some way. It'd be nice. But otherwise, I think it worked out just fine. Now, in California, you will not encounter those problems at all. So let's start talking about the California ride. First of all, the exterior is beautiful. I think it's great. Now, I think from a distance, the mountains are less descript without the giant dead tree at the top. At the same time, though, I always feel like every time I walk up to both of these attractions, I think they're really pretty. I really like them. I know people have made fun of them. It's Broccoli Mountain, and they took all the character out of it. I don't agree. I really don't agree. I think they look picturesque and pretty, and they take nice photos. One thing I want to mention real quick is that the love and care that went into this Disneyland one is apparent, because that Bayou Country sign, and we were talking about the exterior, and it's right there at the exterior. What was the Critter Country sign, they very nicely updated to Bayou Country, and they added, I believe it's a pelican at the top. And the pelican looks like it's been there the whole time. Whoever did that matched the art style that already was there from the 80s when they made the sign, and it's gorgeous. I love it. It looks like it's been there since day one. And that's what you like to see. Can you tastefully update things so they feel like they're always there, but they tell the new story you want to tell? I think they did a great job. The exterior, I think, is great. I love, I will say, in Florida, one thing I think is definitely better in Florida is when you first dive in. So you load the attraction, you go around the corner, and you plop into the water that's at the basin of the drop. It's not really at the basin, but it goes around the drop, this little pool. In Florida, because it's not that narrow ride flume, it's open there. And so it does feel like you've dropped sort of into a little bayou. And it's very picturesque and pretty, and I like it. In California, it has the narrow flume that kind of in the way. And so it's not as cool when you first come out and look up at the drop off to the side and you're in the log. It's not as cool because of that, but it's not a big difference. The queue, their entrance is different because it was different for Splash. Their barn, I do like the way their entrance is set up better. Our barn is very pretty. I don't like the murals. I get the idea when someone pitched in a meeting, what if we got real New Orleans artists or real Louisiana artists to paint murals on the side of the barn? I get it. I get why that decision was made. And then once you've signed on to it, I think it's hard to be like, well, you know how we hired that person to paint that mural? Maybe we don't like the mural. Like, well, you're going to fire them? The PR backlash is probably not worth it at that point. So I don't know if they arrived at that point with the Florida one, but it doesn't really work. At Disneyland, the murals are painted sort of on the building behind the barn, and they work a lot better. They're not my favorite thing. They help tell a story. I don't care for the art style, but they work better in California than painted on the side of the yellow barn in Florida. The queue, mostly identical. The propping, I love the propping. I think the amount of storytelling in here is great. And the way at its core, it's a simple story. It is Tiana's having a party. She needs to find musicians. She's decided the Bayou, because she found Lewis there, is the best place to find musicians, and we're going with her to help. It's a pretty basic story. It's as basic as Fox and Bear want to eat rabbit who's decided to leave home. They're both simple, basic stories. They both work. They're both good. Then what's great in classic Disney fashion, which actually kind of wasn't there for Splash Mountain, is there's layers of story, which Tiana evokes more modern day Disney attractions, which I will say in surprisingly with Splash, that's built in the era where they begin that intricate storytelling, when we start to get things like the Indiana Jones adventure, where there's all sorts of hidden things to find and there's layers of story. Like there's the base story, but then you can discover more as you ride the attraction more or read into the lore or find things in the queue. Splash didn't really have that. And that didn't make Splash worse for it. But I think it's an expectation of modern Imagineering, and they nailed it with Tiana. There is a lot to find in the queue, whether it's the story of the stolen license plate, or more details about the party, or details about what Tiana's been up to between The Princess and the Frog and the eventual Disney Plus series that they're making. There's a lot to learn and find and discover, a lot of interesting things. And there's references to Splash, which I did not expect. I thought this was going to be a complete erasure of the attraction ever existing. And to my surprise and delight, they didn't go that route. They actually allowed references to exist in both queues. We have the little wood animals of the fox, the bear, and the rabbit. And in Florida, you have the Fossil Springs crate survived. And there's little things like that, and I love that. And of course, Lewis stuck in the log is a reference. I appreciate that Splash Mountain will live on, even though they know we can't make merchandise with it. We can't really reference it for whatever reason. That's not probably the Imagineers' decision. It probably comes from lawyers and corporate and PR. They can't really, understandably, they can't really mention it existing. And so I appreciate the fact that it was still, someone signed off and said, it's fine. Like we can reference it in tasteful ways, and this way the people that love Splash Mountain still feel like it lives here and it's referenced and acknowledged, which I think it would have been a lot harder for people to swallow if there was no acknowledgement. The queue is great. I love the queue. I think it's beautiful. It's great. They spent a ton of money very clearly on the first portion. And then you got to the salt mine, and I don't know what else you could have done. I don't know what else you do, but they took out the Brer Frog scene became just like storage. And in Disneyland, it's the same thing, where they just painted it like a salt mine, and they put up some signs, and they put up the video warning screens. And it works. I don't know what more could have been done or needed to be done. And the load area, same with Florida. You have the very cool the lifts where the items from the co-op would be loaded into the logs. They're using the logs as like a delivery system, essentially. So let's talk about the thing that takes the Disneyland ride down a serious notch. That is the thing that's always hurt that Splash Mountain. It's the ride system. Obviously, given the infrastructure you built in 1989, it's not really possible to make the mountain bigger and go with a wider flume and have the side-by-side seating like Florida and Tokyo. That was never going to be possible. The sad thing is that single file seating, it's lame. It's lame and uncomfortable, and it kind of hurts the ride. You don't have to be a large person to end up with your legs touching a stranger, or just the fact it's just not easy to get in. I know those of you who are under 30 years old and probably lighter than I am are probably saying, it's not a big deal. For the rest of us, it is. Although those of you who are younger may not understand that the reason why you get so wet on this ride is because of the ride system difference. It is a different thing than the Florida one. It is a narrow flume with a single file log that fills the flume there, and so it pushes all that water up and in as it comes down, and that's why you get soaking wet on this version. The person in the front of this ride is never walking out. Never mind, dry is absolutely not an option in seat one on Splash Mountain at Disneyland nor Tiana's Bayou Adventure. It doesn't happen. The only thing you can get lucky with is when I went to my first Magic Key preview, it was like the last hour of the night they were open, and they sat me alone in row 3. And it was the best ride because I didn't get wet, because there wasn't enough weight in the log, and I was centered, and so it didn't push either end of the log down to push water onto me. So I loved it. It was fantastic. Then the next 2 days I rode it, I was put in a full log, and I was wet for several hours. And my shoes probably still smell a little bit. It's very hard to get that. I've washed them, but it's still kind of a little there. So there's nothing they could have done. It's a shame because I really love this attraction at Disneyland. At Disney World, I like the attraction. I think it's very good. I think, Splash is always going to be preferable to me. Personal preference is going to be Splash because that's what I grew up with. The Brer characters I always loved, not for what they stood for because I had no idea as a child. I just knew I liked the funny bear and the funny fox and the cute rabbit, and they were cute plush, and I wanted to hug them. That's what I knew as a kid. That's what I liked about them. I liked their character design that Mark Davis came up with. Now, that's always going to be my preference. Do I think Splash Mountain in Florida was better than Tiana's Bayou Adventure in Florida? No. I do think they're both competent attractions. They're both as good as one another. I will tell you with absolute certainty that the Tiana's Bayou Adventure ride at Disneyland is better than Splash Mountain at Disneyland ever was. Ever. Because the Splash Mountain at Disneyland was never in anyone's conversation for what is the best attraction at a Disney park. It was never in that conversation. And if it was, maybe it was a recency thing the first couple years it existed, and then once Indiana Jones opened, people were like, forget that. Obviously, Splash was popular because it was a thrill ride, and it's exciting to get wet on the ride. It gets hot. The summer gets hot in California. It gets real hot in Florida. It's part of the popularity there too. But Florida, the nice thing was they definitely benefited from. There was an increased capacity, and there was a need for more capacity because you would more likely walk off the ride semi-dry. And so more people would ride the Florida one. And California people were absolutely discouraged because they knew, man, if I get sat in the front and it's a full log, the rest of my day is ruined and we can't go I don't want to go sit and eat dinner or sit on more rides with a wet butt. That's not going to make an enjoyable day at Disneyland for me. I will tell you, the 4 times I rode Splash before it was almost closed were only because I think I was staying on property. I think I was staying at the Disneyland Hotel or Grand Californian. And so it was like, oh, so for the afternoon, we'll go ride Splash Mountain, and then we'll go across to DCA, and we'll ride Grizzly River Run, and we'll do them both a couple times. And then we'll go back and change and enjoy the rest of our day at the parks. That shouldn't be necessary to enjoy things. And so I have no problem with there being, I think Splash or Tiana in Florida is the right amount of moisture. No one ever comes off of that drenched. And if I know someone's going to jump in that comment and go, I was absolutely drenched on the Florida Splash Mountain, other than the jet, right? The jet was bad. The jet is long gone now. If you don't know what I'm talking about, when the logs would go down the drop, there were these water jets that shot over onto the people in the logs ready to go up that second lift hill. That was removed in the changeover, and for many years towards the end of Splash Mountain in Florida, it was just off. They had gotten rid of it anyway. If you didn't get hit by that jet in the earlier years, you got wet, but you don't understand. If you've never been on the Disneyland Splash Mountain, you don't know what wet is, because it is a different kind of wet. It is the kind of wet where it hit the pants and went all the way through, and now your underwear are as wet as the pants, if not more so. Your socks are drenched from the start of the sock all the way through to the toe, and the shoe is soaked through as well. It is a level of wet that unless you rode that ride, you likely have not experienced on any water ride at any theme park in the world. You can correct me if I'm wrong. If you've been on something wilder and wetter somewhere else, please tell me. But definitely nothing in a Disney park even somewhat equates to the level of wet you could get on Splash Mountain in California. So the ride system is a hindrance, and it's the main hindrance because otherwise this is a top 10 Disney attraction worldwide, at least the Disneyland version. It is unbelievably great. The staging, the pacing, everything. And kudos to the Disneyland team. We have had some problems in Florida, to say the least. I know before I got there, people said the ride was having issues. My 3 rides, I saw no issues. Everything worked flawlessly. It was beautiful. All the animatronics in tremendous shape. But it's very clear that the Disneyland version was designed, and then it's how do you slot the scenes into Florida, which works because, again, you're replacing the same ride. And when they built the Disney World one, while they changed a lot, the basics of the ride remained, and so you could do that, right? If you designed to replace all the scenes in California, you may end up with a spot or two that you have to do something a little different in Florida, but otherwise, you can fill out the ride and the narrative remain the same. But at Disneyland, the thing is, I think the narrative's a little easier to follow. The scenes are better laid out, and you have less of that quote-unquote dead space, but you don't really. It's mostly because you definitely move at a faster speed in the Disneyland one. So the sad thing is, at Disney World, you get to see the characters a little longer, for sure. At Disneyland, you see them less, but they're staged better. So there's a trade-off to either spending more time getting to admire the really amazing animatronic, or it's just better staged and it moves through the story faster. But inevitably, what happens is you have the Disney World problem where people think, there's nothing happening, and I don't have a good attention span. And so I'm angry at this ride because on Splash Mountain there was a nonsensical vignette here that kept me entertained. Which, don't get me wrong, I love those nonsensical vignettes. They were charming and wonderful and great. But at the same time, we're telling a different story, and I don't know that I need an animal every 2 feet to tell that story. Like there is no doubt they spent a ton of money. These new animatronics are not cheap, and they built a load of them. More than they've built for anything at a non-Tokyo Disney park in... Man, I remember calculating this, and I'm trying to think. Obviously, Rise doesn't come close. Pandora, Cars. I mean, Cars had a decent fleet, but still not near the size of the fleet they built for Tiana. 10, 9. Yeah, I mean, no, it's got to be the most projects a Walt Disney Company-owned park, or even partially owned park, has done. Since the 90s? Gotta be since the 90s. So at that point, how do you argue? Like, they clearly spent money they haven't spent, at least on animatronics, in a very, very long time. So to say it's like Chapek era, and to say it's indicative of that time, when we got rides that had zero animatronics, or rides that they thought they were gonna have animatronics and ended up with none, like Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. And that's the thing, is everyone comes off of Cosmic Rewind and they go, I loved it, it's the best, blah, blah, blah. It's a building full of big empty scenes. And it ends with a big empty scene. When they talk to you on the screen, there's a big empty room there that was supposed to have stuff in it. There was supposed to be like a living room set in there at one point, and they just didn't put it. But we're okay with that. It's Guardians. It was fun and entertaining because it's a roller coaster, so I'm okay with there being some dead space in it. But when it came to Tiana, where it's not even really dead space, it is still themed, and they built stuff in the space. But because there's not animals doing something in that scene, we are far more negative about it because we're looking for something to be negative about. As opposed to Guardians, where, look, I came off that ride and I was like, well, that's amazing fun, but if we want to nitpick, let's nitpick. And I don't even know that nitpicking is, I'm underselling it. That big empty room at the end of Cosmic Rewind is pretty bad. It's silly. It's silly to have this screen over here and then just this big, it's just such a big white empty room with nothing going on at all. And it can't even be compared to Tiana, where they put like firefly lights, and someone programmed that, and they put a projection in the background, and they did things. There are things happening in those quote-unquote dead spaces, as opposed to this dead space where there's actually nothing. There is actually nothing there. The projection is way over here, and then there's like bigger than an Orlando studio apartment going all the way back with it's just a big empty room with nothing. Not even like a picture on the wall. But yeah, that's how we people came into something with a more open mind than they did to this attraction, because either they were mad about the reasons it was being made or that it was replacing Splash Mountain. And then you want to talk about big empty space. The thing I don't like is Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. You want to compare Tiana to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, I think you're comparing apples and oranges. Runaway Railway actually is just a bunch of big flat walls with a very small handful of regrettable animatronic figures, other than Daisy. I think Daisy turned out good. Daisy looks good. The rest of them are junk. They look terrible. They don't look like, they're supposed to look like the Mickey short. They don't. I don't know what they look like. It doesn't look to me as if that cartoon has come to life. And instead looks to me as if you built a noodle body for Mickey and Minnie and then threw projection domes on their heads. And the balloon, the one at the fair is the most egregious. Actually, the one in the jungle scene is no better either. Those two are both horrendous. The car one is decent. I think the car one's okay. The other ones are terrible. And so again, like to come from 2020 to 2024 and see that quality difference in animatronics, to see the love and the care put into replacing something beloved that wasn't put into replacing the great movie ride. And you could argue with me all you want, I'm never gonna agree. And it's not because I love the great movie ride more than Splash Mountain. That's not the reasoning at all. It is a quality difference. They absolutely put more quality into Tiana than they ever did into Runaway Railway. Runaway Railway is, it's sad. It's sad what they replaced. They ripped out all that artistry and replaced it with a big empty warehouse where they project onto walls. And it's just not good. And the animatronics aren't good. As opposed to Tiana, where you took the bones of Splash Mountain and you layered onto it and you made something, at least in many cases, as good, and I think in the case of Disneyland, way, way, way better than what was there before. But yeah, I mean, to go from Old America Sings animatronics and a couple of Brer characters that just look terrible, never mind the ones that didn't make sense, that Brer Rabbit on the mine cart, man, or the hand car, it felt like I was at like a Stu Leonard's or one of those places where like they're like, oh, we'll be like the Disney of supermarkets and we'll have animatronics. And of course their animatronics don't move as well as Disney's because they're a grocery store or Universal in most cases. Like Hagrid and Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. Here come the Universal fans and the Splash fans are coming for me now because I've applied logic. Oh no. But like the one with the hand car was so bad. It just looked so stupid. Oh, and this is such an improvement. Such an improvement. The scenes are just so much, the animatronics blow away the old ones. The pacing is perfect. The music, the way it flows through this version of the ride is great. But all the scenes look good. The staging, like I think he's Mondo the big frog with the drums, I think. I love the way he's staged where he's straight ahead. There's a long straightaway and you're looking straight on at him the whole time and you really get to enjoy not only him playing the bongos, but the fireflies dancing behind him. It's a very cute scene. The way they're all set up, it's definitely set up better than Florida. I can't say anything different. But to go from what was a fun log flume with an uncomfortable ride system and kind of janky animatronics to a log flume with a kind of uncomfortable ride system and Tokyo Disney level animatronics and scenes. It just moves this way up. This would be, if it wasn't for the ride system, this would legitimately be in my top 10 Disney attractions in the world at Disneyland. There's no argument. The final scene it's you get to see the final scene better too in this version. It's laid out better. You know, Larry the Armadillo, who I love and I think is a great original character. I love his appearances in Florida, but I really like them better in California. There's several points where he's closer to you, he's easier to spot. He's more of an Easter egg in the last scene in California, though. You have to kind of know where you're looking to find him. But that's the other thing is that the original, all the things I said, I want to recap all the things I liked a lot about the Florida ride, which were, they gave us all the things we always ask for, which are original characters, original music, and lots of new animatronics. We got both rides, lots of new animatronics. We got an original song and a really good soundtrack. That the Zydeco or whatever, all the versions of the Princess and the Frog songs in there are they're stuck in my mind. They're really well orchestrated, really well arranged. I love them. And then you made a bunch of really charming, memorable, original characters that aren't from the film. Not just Larry, but all these animal band figures, they're all so cute. The possum, where's the possum? I always forget, I don't know any of their names yet, except Larry. But she's adorable in the ride. I almost think the animatronic versions are cuter than the plush, which is not always a thing. I think merchandising, guys, we gotta stop ordering cheap plush and merchandising, guys. These are really cute characters, and I don't know that you fully captured how cute they are necessarily in the plush form. She's not so bad. He doesn't look like the one in the ride. the raccoon guy. I'm not wild about it. But they're great original characters. They're all charming. The bears, the wolf, the fox, whatever he is. Is he a fox? He's a fox. They're all great original characters. They have cool design. And the frog characters, they're cute and charming and original. And that's what it's all about, is creating a world you've never been to. And I think creating original characters does that. Yeah, so it's, there's these characters I recognize, but then look at all these new friends we've made along the way. And then having that big finale where everybody comes back and it's just loaded with animatronics and animated figures. It's a great finish. And I adore that, like, kiss goodbye from Mama Odie. I think it's great, where it's a great figure and it gives you the goodbye. And then also, if you get stuck there for a little bit, you get to watch Juju the snake attempt to eat beignets. Do snakes eat beignets? I tend to believe they do not. But I am amused by the fact that the snake keeps trying to eat her beignets and Mama Odie keeps yelling at him. But we got all of those things we asked for, and at Disneyland it is in a perfect package. The atmosphere back there, I love what they've created back there. It really does feel like a new land in a lot of respects. We haven't seen the Lewis store yet. Ray's Berets, though, captures all the magic of what was the Briar Patch and adds to it. So the thoughtfulness, I still think it was a huge mistake to remove the Brer. They pulled the wood carving portraits of the Brer characters that were in the store, got removed a year or so ago and replaced with very generic woodland creature art pieces that I think they bought from Home Goods or some store like that. And everyone was real mad because they're like, this is terrible. How could you do this? And now they've gone in and they created custom pieces with Lewis and Ray and so on. And they're the ones that replace, and verbatim, they replaced where the Brer pieces were. They put these new pieces in. And so again, whatever you build has to be as good as or better than what you replaced. The new thing has to be as good as or better than what you replaced. That's always the rule of theme parks. And so if you look at just Ray's Berets as a barometer, you made all the places you had custom art originally, you made custom art again. You did all the propping, everything the same again. But then you created like a nighttime window scene that's really charming, and people stop and look at it and really love it. And it makes it better. You trumped the original thing. Not only did you match it by making sure everywhere you had story and theming and original props originally, you did that again. But then you went a step beyond and were like, we could do something new and really cool with modern technology in this shop. And that's how I feel about the Disneyland Tiana ride in general. Is Splash Mountain is great, but we have an opportunity here with the way all of this technology has progressed to do something way better. And so what if we actually put all new great audio animatronics in this ride? How good could it be? And this is the answer. The reviews have been rave. Everyone I ran into, all of our California viewers I ran into out there during the preview, kept stopping me and asking. And I didn't want to project my review onto them, so I always asked first. I was like, did you go on it? Did you like it? And they all said they loved it. And then I would say it back, and they're like, oh yeah, we both. And everyone was in agreement that it was really fantastic. Florida, that doesn't happen as much, and I get it. I understand why people are getting hung up on it there. It does make less sense where it is, but so did Splash. People didn't think about it with Splash because they don't overtly mention 50 times that we're in Georgia, as opposed to the Tiana ride where it's very New Orleans centric. It's mentioned 100 times in the background music loop and in the ride and in the scenes. And we are told 1,000,000 times where we are. And so we keep thinking about that. Does the general public think about that? No. Are the sight lines with it bad? No. It's not the Tron building. It's not the Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind building. Those are egregious sightline problems. I don't think the Tiana Salt Dome is an egregious sightline problem. And honestly, I think in Florida, I think it kind of marked the beginning of a transition where we are going a different direction with Frontierland, where it's going to be a different thing, where the American frontier is it's all the area in this country that we marched forward from. Because Liberty Square, right? On the east side of the land, you have a different land, Liberty Square, which represents colonial America. And that's where our country began, with colonial America. And then we went west. And so if you start with Liberty Square and then Frontierland becomes an exploration of all destinations west of the original 13 colonies, you can make that work really well. And so if it's New Orleans, and in the case of Cars, the Pacific Northwest, and the Country Bears represent a little bit of the South, I think it works. I think you can make it work. Does it work completely right now? No. Do I think they can make it work? I do. I think it makes sense. And I'm not going to get into the rivers of America. We'll save that for a different video. That's not about Tiana's Bayou Adventure at Disneyland. But I get why people are hung up on the Florida version, but there's no doubt, once you ride the California one for the first time, once you get over the fact that you are absolutely soaked, you'll have that moment where you're like, that's a really great attraction. That is Disney quality. That is a rare case in the last several years where they took something, replaced something that meant something to me, and really plussed it and made it better. Because we know very well, even in the best eras of WDI, sometimes those things don't happen. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, and you end up with something inferior to what you originally had, right? 2008 is not a particularly bad time in Imagineering. It's not the highest point. I think it gets to one of the highest points after that. And that's when they redid Spaceship Earth was that one? It was the third time they redid Spaceship Earth. I hate that 2008 version. It's terrible. It's horrendous. I don't like the music as much. The Judi Dench narration, it's not her fault, it's the script. The jib-jab video ending thing is horrendous. It's bad. It's a real bad update of Spaceship Earth. And so I'm sad that it's still there. But that was a particularly good era of Imagineering, at least entering one, and it was a bad redo of that attraction. And so things can go wrong, certainly can go wrong, and it's nice when they don't. And I think in the case of this attraction, they went the opposite way. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous. I think everyone that goes there, it's going to become, once again, become a real headliner for Disneyland, even when it's not summer. I think people will put up with it because it's so good that I think it will make people think, I'm going to soak my pants through. But I really like that ride. And it says it's a 45-minute wait. That's not bad. So let's go do it. And I'll tell you, I'm in that boat now. I am in that boat now, and I kind of hate it. I kind of hate that I love it because now this isn't what was a ride that I was like, under the right circumstances, I'll go ride it. Or of course, for the farewell, I was like, I want to experience this many more times because I haven't really seen it much in my life. Is now something where every trip I have to ride it at least once. Every trip I will now have to plot an outfit or a clothing change. And you can't, if someone's going to, why don't you just wear a poncho? The poncho covers the top. The top isn't the part I'm getting drenched on. It's everything below the waist. And so if someone has a below the waist poncho that they recommend, please let me know. But until that either becomes a thing or I find it, I'm going to have to plot an outfit or an outfit change that's going to work to ride this ride every time. We have the media event this week. I have to tell you, there's a whole day where it's open to us. I'm planning a special outfit, and I'm just going to go over and over because I don't know when. I assume it being the media event, the line will be short. And this is a great opportunity. I'm still a fanboy. I do this professionally, but I'm still a fanboy. I still love this art form and love these parks the way I always did. And so the fact that I know this ride I love this ride, and I'm going to get the opportunity to ride it a bunch. I am not missing out on that. And professionalism be damned. I am going to make the most of my press day at Disneyland and ride this thing as much as possible because I know like it's always going to have a wait. It's an e-ticket. It's inevitable. So I'm going to make the most out of it and enjoy it because I really, really, really love it. Kudos to the team. They did a tremendous job. A tall task, a really tall task to replace something that meant so much to so many people. But in the case of Disneyland, they went above and beyond. Florida, I still really like it, but I'd love for them to go back in a couple years and address the shortcomings that came of it being a Disneyland-focused project. I think they did very good. I don't think they did the best they could do. In the case of Disneyland, there is no argument. They did the best they could do. I can't think of anything other than somehow spending hundreds of millions of dollars to rip out this ride system and build something else, or maybe invent a big plastic bubble that goes over us to keep the water out. But that wouldn't be thematic, right? Outside of those two things, I can't think of anything they could have possibly done differently to make it better. I don't have anything to nitpick other than a ride system that they had to work with that existed before the ride did. I don't have anything. I don't. And I think for those of you that don't like the Disney World version because you think the scenes are a little empty, you're gonna ride this and feel totally different. I absolutely promise you, you're gonna feel totally different. So, yeah, it's a great addition, fantastic change, and Rave, I give it 7 out of 7. I don't think we usually rate the rides in these things, but I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 7. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching this honest review. You can hit the like button and subscribe for more. You can become a WIGS member and join our Patreon program at patreon.com/WWNT. We're actually gonna start soon doing classic honest reviews where I review things that aren't brand new, just things that either have existed or still exist but are older at the Disney parks. And we will let our WIGS members nominate what they want to be in those honest reviews. So become a part of our community, get in the Discord, and let us know how you feel about these things. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you real soon.
Look at all these beautiful faces.
Hello? Any musicians down here who want to jam?
They can play.
Listen to this.